Thank you, Madam Chairman. You're well aware that I'm not a familiar presence in Concord, and the fact of the matter is I really don't know what your protocols or expectations are, but I would like to tell you in my mind that in addition to addressing each of you, my real purpose is to attempt to address those of you who may yet have an open mind on this question. And when I say open mind, I don't mean to juxtapose that with closed mind, because I can tell you that through most of my life, I favored capital punishment and the death penalty. I'm simply recognizing that there are many, many people who, for moral or political or ideological reasons, or perhaps driven by identification with victims, have very strong views one way or the other. I am assuming, in speaking to you, that some people remain open and are listening attentively to what a person has to say who may have changed their mind. So I have changed my mind, and I would like to explain to you how it is that I came about to change my mind. And before I go any further, I need to do something that I feel emotionally compelled to do and tell you that when I came here this afternoon, I was addressed by Sister Anastasia, who is a Sister of Mercy. And for any of you who have been students in a parochial school, you will understand that there were two occasions in my life when I used to snap to attention, one when I was in the service for years and years, and the other when I'm in the presence of a Sister of Mercy. You should also understand that my cousin, Virginia Stanton, was a Sister of Mercy, and she used to proselytize me because she was well aware that I favored the death penalty. Perhaps because my dad was a policeman, perhaps because I grew up in a universe where, for me, the concept of the death penalty was a generality. I thought that it was a penalty that fit many crimes. So when I became Attorney General in 1997, I will tell you directly, I did not have any conscientious objection to the death penalty, any more than I did when I served in the military. But as time passed, my views changed, and there were particular reasons for that. And I need to tell you now, particularly those amongst the clergy, I do not share your view of moral opposition to the death penalty. I can well understand why the death penalty might be considered by many to be a fair penalty. Here are some of my experiences. After I was Attorney General and after my boy served in Iraq, I had a conversation with one of them who saw as much action and did as much damage in Iraq as any other Marine. This is not a person opposed to violence. My son Tim said to me, in what I thought would be a long discussion, "Our government shouldn't kill its own people, Dad." You have no idea how often I have thought about my son's refrain. My son is not wishy-washy about matters of life and death. My son is a combat Marine. Then you should understand that I really don't think that it is probable that our state would execute an innocent man, and innocent in the moral sense. But you need to understand that I once authorized the prosecution of a person where I was absolutely certain of that person's guilt. His name was James Buchanan. He was guilty in my mind of the death of a little girl named Elizabeth Knapp. And what happens so frequently in life is those people who are most certain about things have the danger of just being wrong. Well, if you're the Attorney General through the course of 80 murder cases, finding out that you're wrong is an insight. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I think it's probable that the state would execute a person who is not morally guilty of it. But I will tell you that the next time that this state executes a person, it will be more than 75 years and 1,000 murders since that's happened. And all of you who are open-minded should ask the question as to whether or not you would see that as just or fair or equal, because that's an important question. Over the course of almost 6 years as Attorney General in some 80 cases, I had another experience, and that would be the experience of dealing with the victims of each of those crimes. I can tell you that from my perspective, there were many people which in a moral sense I would have said, this person deserves the death penalty. I'm very mindful of the death of the police. Of course I am. One of my sons is a policeman. But I have to tell you where I was really moved. I was moved by the death of a 5-year-old girl named Elizabeth Knapp. I was moved by the death of children. At a personal level, my reaction would be what yours was, outraged. But of course, my reaction wasn't intended to be just personal. I had professional obligations. And I began, as I had these actual experiences, not theoretical views, to ask myself the question, how is it that a person goes about being fair and being seen as fair? And I can tell you that with the passage of time, I was no longer able to answer that question for myself as it pertained to the death penalty in any circumstances. Not because of moral or religious reasons, but because I think we all owe a duty of fairness. I have two things to say in closing. I'm mindful of the rage that the murders can cause. I observed many people make their statements after a person was about to be convicted, was about to be sentenced. But there is one that stands out beyond any other. I will never forget it. It occurred many years ago now, more than 10. 2 young women named Zantoff, whose mom and dad had been slaughtered. They were professors up at Dartmouth. And I had gone in expecting to hear what I normally hear, which was an extraordinary degree of rage and retribution. And what I will never forget is the extraordinary dignity of those 2 young women who spoke with compassion about their folks in loving memory. They never uttered a word in retribution. I don't recollect their even mentioning the names of these 2 young men, Tulloch and Parker. I don't remember that. And I thought to myself when it was finished that if ever there were a memorial that one would want to leave for a departed person, it would be the dignity of their extraordinary statements at that court. There was no hate. There was no retribution. What there was a soliloquy that was absolutely beautiful. And I thought to myself that day that if their parents were in heaven looking down at them, they would be proud and they would have thought they were well sent off. But here is where I come down on this at the end of the day. It isn't one thing or the other. It isn't just a question of what we decide, but it's also a question of how you decide it. And now I'm going to particularly address myself to those among you whom I do not know, who may be on the fence. I, as an attorney, deal with 3 levels of proof. Probability, 51-49. Clear and convincing, 75-25. Proof beyond reasonable doubt, 99-1. So I ask you this question. If we were presenting a bill that said impose a death penalty, then with what degree of certainty should you cast that vote? From my perspective, if I were dealing with the way I would feel in just my gut, I would say I would do that 60-40. But the part of the analysis that I cannot overcome is that when a society decides to impose a death penalty, the decision just shouldn't be, am I for it or not for it today? How do I feel about the politics of it? Who's going to call me tomorrow? The question that I truly believe each of us owes to the community as a whole is not am I for it or am I against it, but what level of certainty do I think I should have that as a matter of public policy, I should vote to have a death penalty. And since we have a death penalty, I would like you please to consider the following. And to the best of my ability, I am not referring to the current case, except it is there. And that is, understand that the next time this state executes somebody, will be the first time in 75 years. It'll be the first time through 1,000 murders. Let me tell you, as a person for whom murder was not something I read about in the paper, but who did it, I could not see a difference in those 80 victims. They weren't different to me. Is the defendant who's convicted going to be treated differently? How will the state of New Hampshire repeat a history in that circumstance? If punishment is supposed to be neither cruel nor unusual, how do you take 1 in 1,000 over 75 years and persuade somebody that that's not unusual? Now, I know that people who make arguments can make rational arguments. They can make those arguments, and I can understand them the way I feel about it in my gut. But I'm an adult, and I know that that will not be seen as fair by me any longer, and it will not be seen as fair by history. That's what I wanted to say to those of you who are open. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the gentleman?